Hello everyone, welcome to International Lawyer. I'm Eric Lee, and President of the Asian Institute of International Law and Professor of Songwoo University, Seoul, Korea. Today I'm here in Tokyo in order to have an interview with Ambassador Yamada Chusei. He is one of the most highly renowned international lawyers of our time. And he was actually a career diplomat of Japan for more than 40 years. He was serving for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Japanese government, and at the time, during that period, he was the director of International Convention Bureau and the United Nations Bureau, and finally he served as the ambassador of Japan to Egypt and India. I'd like to start my interview with your personal background, because in order to understand someone's present, we have to know about his past first. So, would you briefly introduce your family? What did your parents do, and how do you think your parents' education influenced your character or ambitions?
Well, Professor, it's very kind of you to see me today. Well, I was born in 1931. In what is Kobe now. It's next to Osaka. And well, my grandfather was a merchant in Osaka. He traded rice, and he wanted my father to succeed him. But my father didn't like to be a merchant. Oh. And in those days, the merchant in Osaka had a sort of thinking that higher education is not good for merchant. If you get the higher education, right. You will lose money. So, but my father wanted to get higher education, and he wanted to be to become an engineer. So, so he didn't obey my grandfather, and he had an engineering education, and he first joined the OSK line. It's Osaka Shosen line. It's one of the two big merchant marine company. And he was as an engineer on the ship. He's been traveling around the world. In fact, when I was born, he wasn't in Japan. Oh. He was traveling somewhere near Argentina. And then just before the war broke out, he was recruited by Japan Electric Company. It's now divided, after the war, it's divided into 9 regional electric, like Tokyo Electric Company, Tube Electric Company, but in those days there was only one. And he was mainly handling the construction of power stations. Especially he was an engineer on boiler. So we moved around Japan. And well, my mother was just a housewife. But she was also very much interested in educating me. And funny thing, when I was just, even before I go to kindergarten, she took me to English lessons. But,
in the 1940s?
But the war broke out. And during those days, I was just a young boy. I didn't know what was going around, but I also wanted to be a scientist. I was very much interested in the scientists. And at the end of the war, I was attending a middle school in Hiroshima. And I think two things have changed my life. One is what happened in Hiroshima on August 6th, that is the atomic bomb. And fortunately, I was not in town. We were told to take out the experimental equipment to the countryside. So we were out of Hiroshima. So but I went back there after a week. That was really a shock. And then there were two famous nuclear scientists who came to Hiroshima. One was Professor Nishina, and he was sort of pioneer of nuclear science in Japan, and he was investigating the result of the atomic bomb. The other was still very young Professor Tomonaga, who later got Nobel Prize.
Right, due to,
And what Professor Tomonaga told me, I think influenced me a lot. He said that it is not the role of the scientist to get rid of nuclear weapons or to put any limitation on nuclear weapons. It is the politicians and administrators who are responsible for that.
Right.
And so I thought, the scientists couldn't control things. I better become some. But in my family there was no bureaucrat at all. So I was the first one who became a bureaucrat. And so I gave up the science, and then I entered University of Tokyo and studied law. The reason I joined the foreign services is the influence of my mother. Right after the end of the war, she told me that her dream was to send me to the United States to study. But because of the defeat, because of the economic turmoil, my family cannot afford to send me to study abroad. So I told her, don't worry, I will go to the United States. And I thought the best, easiest way for me is to join the Japanese. And so I joined the foreign service, and the foreign service sent me to the United States for 2 years study.
You spent most of your childhood while Japan was expanding its militarism. How did that environment influence your future life?
Well, I think it's not so much of my experience during my childhood, but I think what I learned after the war, and particularly in the university, and also in the United States. I really feel that when we had Meiji restoration, I think our ancestors did a great job to learn from Western Europe, to introduce, I think they realized that how backward Japan was. So they tried to learn from the Western world. I think it was, and for instance, I think Japan was a few countries where you could get higher education in Japanese, and I think we owe that to our ancestors. But I think this process took place during the colonialism, and to catch up with the Western world. I think Japan also became a colonial party, and I think for the Japanese, this big development, becoming power in the world for the glory. But on the other hand, I think we did not understand that glory of one country means tragedy for other countries. And I think in the present world, I do not think we should be always thinking of the past, but I think we should be looking forward. But still in doing so, I don't think we should forget what happened in the past.
Okay, so we're going to talk with some personal background again. So you studied law at the University of Tokyo, which was quite prestigious at the time, as well as today. So who taught you international law at Tokyo University, and how are their teachings? And what did it say about the past and future of Japan in the international community?
Well, as far as international law is concerned, I took the lecture of Professor Kisaburo Yokota, and I think he was a very prestigious professor. And also there was a special course on international organization by Professor Takano. But to be very frank, and it might not sound comfortable to Professor Nakatani, but after joining the Foreign Service, I think what helped me most in dealing with international law is not the international law lecture at the university here, but more basic legal studies, like we had Professor Odaka teaching us the what is it?
Philosophy of law.
Philosophy of law, and Professor Miyazawa's lecture on constitution, Professor Dando's lecture on criminal law, and Professor Wagatsuno's lecture on civil law. Those are the basic that teaches the basic legal concept. And I think international law for practitioners like me is something like procedure law. Now, for instance, criminal procedure law. You cannot understand criminal procedure unless you know the criminal law or constitution itself. You cannot really understand the international law without knowing the basic legal concept. And so this is, I'm not belittling any influence from Professor Yokota or Professor Takano, but still, I think to develop your legal thinking, you have to have an overall education. And when I went to the lecture school, and I took international law course by Professor Leo Gross.
He's a very famous professor.
His course here in the University of Tokyo, in those days, the lectures are just lectures. It's one way education. But in the United States, it's a two-way education. It's a case law education, and it's not really dealing with minor things, but through the case law study, they teach the real foundation of international law, and that was very useful.
You joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1954.
1954.
So it's after you were joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you had an opportunity to study at the French School of Law and Diplomacy. I'd like to have more story about the French school. So could you tell me about your special memories or interesting stories in the years of the French school?
So I think I joined the University of Tokyo in 1950 when the Korean War broke out. Japan was still under occupation. And when I joined the foreign service in 54, we just obtained independence just 2 years after. And as soon as I joined the foreign office, they just sent me straight to the United States. So first year I went to Swasma College. It's undergraduate. I thought it would be better to get used to not the specific subject, but to get American life. And then went to the Fletcher School. The Fletcher School at that time was very small. Very small school, but it was as a professional school. They had, I think total was only about 30 students, and about half of them are foreign students, mainly from various foreign service students. And the American students, they, after graduation, they went to foreign service or to international trade. Some became teachers. But the good memory I have is that was such a small community. And we had lunch and dinner together. And undergraduate, when you go to undergraduate school, you go to cafeteria and you bring your food yourself. But there, they serve. And so it's like it's right in the family. So we get very close to each other. And good thing is that happens particularly after we left the Fletcher, because everywhere I go, in every capital, we have alumni. And they assist among themselves. And it's a really good, very good result.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some political questions about the Japanese diplomacy. The harmony is one of the most important concepts in Japanese society. Do you think Japan was well harmonized with the other East Asian nations in the post-war period? In your view, what was the best policy and the worst policy of Japan toward other East Asia?
Well, basically, I do say this, harmony and understanding each other is very important. But in real world, you have to admit that there are lots of constraints. In case of Japan, right after the war, Japan was occupied by Allied forces. And then during that period, as I was saying, the Korean War broke out. And East-West conflict was not only in the Iron Curtain area in the West, but this part was another frontier between East and West. And we are, as the occupation forces in Japan, mainly consisted of US forces. And for Japan there is no alternative other than to join Western camp. And Japan became the front line for this confrontation. On the other hand, the Allied powers had the policy in the beginning, not to let Japanese have any armament. After the Korean War, there are policy changes, but still there was a lot of restriction. And so we had to depend on the alliance. Now, we usually say there are three main objectives of the Japanese diplomacy. One is the Japan-US alliance. The second is the United Nations, cooperation with the United Nations. And the third is the Asia. When we talk about Asia, it's mainly Northeast and Southeast Asia. The Central Asia, the west of India is very different. Now, I think we pursue this policy that I would say that this Japan-US alliance occupies such a dominant factor. Our relations with Asia have not been so smooth, and also there is another factor that those Asian countries suffered from the Japanese occupation. And well, now this East-West confrontation, it meant confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. But that factor has now decreased. But I think the tension from North Korea is now higher now. Originally, I think Japan-US military alliance was to some extent directed toward China. But now, I think that aspect is also changing. There is rather improving relations between US and China. And although on one hand China's military is expanding so rapidly, at the moment I don't think that is a threat to Japan. But so I think we have to increase our efforts toward Asia. But we cannot just, for instance, in Europe they have now sort of unified Europe. In Asia, it's, although in abstract we know the Asian value, but when you look up at each country, they are so different. And I think we have to be very pragmatic, and I think I have to listen to them, and whatever we can, I think we have to respond.
You just said Japan should increase the air forces, but many East Asian countries feel uncomfortable seeing that Japan is increasing its armed forces budget. So many people think it is some token of Japanese remilitarism, military trends and things like that. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think we have to have dialogue on this. It is true that except in putting aside nuclear weapons, the conventional forces of Japan has now become rather big. But I think it is very difficult for us to convince the others. But when you look at Japanese self-defense force structure, we have a very strict constraint. And for instance, our Air Force are not allowed to possess any long-range aircraft. Not the cargo planes. But the cargo planes we have because we have to utilize them for our assistance to various world, various regions of the world. We do not have armed long-range aircraft. Now, even for our jet fighters, some of our jet fighters has mid-air deferring facilities, but still the introduction of this has caused lots of discussions in Japan. And because the American specification jet fighters all have this mid-air deferring system, and for them I think it is to extend the range. But in order to change the specification, it's rather difficult. So what they are explaining that even if it has the mid-air deferring system, they do not use it for purpose. When it comes back to the base and refuel the aircraft, if you use two deferring systems, deferring could be done much faster. Now, it's the Japanese logic, and the others may not believe it, but still, I'm trying to say that Japanese has a very strong inclination to put various constraints on our armed forces, not to be used for attack, but only for self-defense. We will not have air carrier. We may have an air carrier for helicopters, but not for fighter planes. Well, if the military experts look at the equipment of our self-defense forces, that they will surely realize that our forces will not be able to operate long time, for long period outside Japan during the time of conflict.
Okay,
but it is very difficult.
I know, yeah, sure.
For others to believe us.
To explain its national foreign policy to another countries which are sometimes inconsistent with each other. Okay, I would shift the topic into Japan-Korea relations. There are many debates between the two countries, and Japan and Korea have often been inconsistent with each other in resolving and compensating for the past wrongdoing. Japan used to express apologies to the past annexation against Korea in general, while denying its legal responsibilities in actual critical point issues such as conflict with cultural heritages and human and material exploitation or dreadful massacres. Do you think has Japan been legally exempted from those responsibilities? It's a very international legal problem.
Well,
So,
the
morally, yeah, Japan accepts, right? Yeah.
I think
yeah.
I think we have to distinguish between the legal aspect and, as I have been saying,
moral aspects.
moral aspect. Now, when, well, so for instance, just take another example. When war ended and when Japan restored diplomatic relations with some of the with allied powers, we had a treaty, San Francisco Peace Treaty, or some bilateral treaties. Now, when you have a war or similar situation, of course, there arises the question of settlement of the damage. But you cannot really solve everything. And but as far as legal questions is concerned, those peace treaties are supposed to settle the questions. Now, in case of our relation with the Republic of Korea, when we established normal relations, we had a basic agreement.
Yes, from 1965.
And there, the question of compensation for damage was solved in a way that Japan would provide the assistance. Now, it doesn't really mean that you cannot, I mean Japan is what shall I say? Japan shouldn't do anything more. It's. I think there have been cases that when you negotiate the treaty and when you think you have settled everything, but there might be some cases which both parties didn't know at that time, and so it's up to the parties concerned to solve if there is any unsolved questions. Now, the sometimes, for instance, on this question of comfort women, I really did not know. The whole picture was known to both parties at the time of our basic agreement. The agreement. Now, but if not, I think there are both ways to argue it. One would say that whether you knew it or not, the basic agreement settles everything, unless it doesn't settle everything, your relations become so unstable. Now, on the other hand, it's perfectly all right for both parties to work on another settlement. But as far as I understand, is that the government of Korea has not officially asked any amendment of the basic agreement or any new agreement on this question. They also know that Japanese are doing to help those victims. Now, I think there's also the question often raised that this, what Japan is doing, is a private fund, and it is not the Japanese national fund. Personally, I do not really see the difference. If the Japanese people are willing to do something in the form of private fund, or why it cannot be accepted. But the others may have a different view. But I think this is certainly the point that which is still stand in the way. And I think there are also many other problems. I think many Korean people have suffered during the war, particularly in some of the workplaces in Japan. Even if that was a private company, but still I think during the war, that was total mobilization of the whole Japanese society.